I need this for the next thing I'm about to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, what do you got there?
I liked
Eagle
your
rare?
previous rants. You know, I was
That was
hoping
Pete Steven, I think.
I was hoping you'd bring the ruckus.
I'm gonna take no kings to an even
Yeah, have a sip.
Yeah.
more extreme level.
Oh,
Okay.
get some courage in there.
You actually want him to be king. You believe we should have a monarchy.
Damn, is that straight whiskey?
Yeah, brother.
Yeah,
We got the heat flowing. Eagle rare too.
I'm actually coming around to the
Thank
idea
you,
that we
Adrian.
just need a king.
So, do you think democracy
Steven is yes, king.
yeah, I knew that's where you were going. So, do you think democracy is an obsolete system?
Yeah, I think it is obsolete. I think it's fucked
Why should the people not have a voice?
because the people are retarded.
Yeah. I set you up. I set you up.
Thank you.
Um,
No, there are some elements of the system that are like good. Like, so the idea of like sort of natural rights, the right to speech, like these sort of like Bill of Rights things, I think is really, really good. But I don't see why it has to be tied to all the other ways we do government. I think the system is completely fucked. And then I think as like technology progresses, as like people just have like more and more and more intelligent AI, then like countries like Singapore is a good example of this. Like Lee Kuan Yew or whatever his name is just going to fucking run circles around us.
Because he's got like a million people to govern. I don't know how many people.
But isn't it like how many
but you
people
could
he has
argue
to
China.
govern?
China has the same advantage.
Yes.
It's a
do you want to live in China?
focused-
I don't.
I don't, because I'm a Westerner and I don't know that world. It's not appealing to me. But I think if you look at it through the lens of like highly coordinated society, I can see the appeal. It's highly coordinated.
Yeah, like democracy is fucked. It's totally fucked because you basically just have a bunch of fucking people who don't understand anything voting on emotions, and then you have like a huge swath of the country running on 2-year election cycles.
Yeah.
And so their
Right.
entire
And whatever you're basing your information on to vote, you're questioning it at every angle, talking about how many
Yeah.
layers of the dream I'm in.
there's
Yeah.
no
No,
forward.
it's super
There's no
disorienting.
forward thinking. It's all kick the can, kick the can, kick the can. It's totally fucked. Like what I think would be an interesting experiment is to not necessarily have like a national king. It would be to like have Chamath just like SPAC a state. Like just do what we're doing in crypto. You take some failing state and you just like raise like $1 trillion and you just like take over the state. You issue shares in the state. You rewrite the whole fucking constitution. And then you just have like, you just elect like a Steve Jobs of the state and you just let him do everything. And just run that experiment in 1 out of 50 states.
Which one would you go for first?
Well, California's dying, so let's start here.
California would be great.
Well, California, in terms of GDP, would be like 5th in the world or something.
Used to be, I think.
yeah,
I don't know if it's
could be
still-
2 in the world.
Dude, we got Silicon Valley, or you don't think we're?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't think we're?
No, I think California is a borderline failed state that it
let's
just
start-
exists.
let's
on the
start with
basis of its
Montana.
geography.
Montana's epic, dude. Don't touch Montana.
Yeah, Montana's chill.
New Mexico.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Missouri.
Missouri.
Like so that, I don't know if Texas would work. They're very like kind of freedom oriented. That might be too much for them. I don't know what the state would be. Maybe like Alabama or something. Take some state that like
you don't worry about like you don't worry about centralization of power.
no, because if you do this on a statewide level, not a national level, if you do it on a statewide level, you just move to another state.
if you don't like the
You
policy.
select another product. It's the same check and balance you have in the free market. It's just like this product sucks. I'm leaving, or I'm choosing to go to another
Wait,
product.
so
right?
these are state kings.
I like the
Yes,
state
state
king
kings.
idea.
Except there's
We do
federal
one state-
law. Like
one state,
how do
one
you get
king.
outside the federal law?
Well, we probably have to start with Texas so that Texas can just tell the federal government to suck it. Maybe they would be big enough to do this. But then you
They'd
just
be
have,
like, cool, no airports.
I
fuck
think
off.
you'd get into a conflict. Look, I'm not saying this will play out, but I'm saying if it did, it'd be interesting. I think if it could play out, it could probably play out with Texas. I think that like half of the federal government, like if it were to happen today, would be like kind of okay with it. Like I don't know that there would be like a broad consensus to like go fight Texas, right? If it were to happen, I actually think like there's just such a critical mass. There's such a plurality of
I
people
think
in the
you'd
country.
start to see wars between states.
Wait, hold on. Can we talk this through? Like, if like a state wanted to secede, what does that process look like? Has
No,
that
they don't have to secede. They just have to just opt out of some parts of some
okay?
elements of.
Can I ask like a very simpleton question? Has this ever happened before? Like, has this even
The South?
have we crossed? Okay, so the Civil War was essentially this, and we did fight a war
Yeah,
amongst
but I
ourselves.
don't
But
think
that was different.
a state can't persist, especially a border state, without federal funding and federal coordination and
disagree.
federal laws.
I disagree. Texas would be Texas would be fine. Texas would be fine.
So
Like,
hold on.
Texas is
The
big
Civil
enough
War
to
was
be fine.
exactly this. We call it slavery, but it was exactly this.
No, it was not
Well, the
because
states are way more interconnected now. You could cripple a state so easily.
no, there is not, dude. Like we can't do universal health care. You think there's gonna be a national consensus to fight Texas?
We have universal health care
No, we don't. Have
For the-
universal
for the
healthcare.
poor.
What? There's no universal health care.
for the poor.
No,
Yes.
Yeah, we have Obamacare.
Medicare.
that's dog shit. That's not universal health care. You can't be like we have universal health care for 1/10 of the population. That's not universal.
I think
we
it's
have,
higher.
we
than
have
that.
required health care.
Yes, I agree that we've been good at giving subsets of poor people in the country benefits. We have been unable to do anything like nationwide in some sort of intelligent sense. The idea that like we're gonna have some uprising against like Texas, like if they do that, there's no
Still
appetite for
questioning
it.
your whole premise. Like, one, I don't know, like how much more power do you want the executive to have? Like Obama expanded the powers. Like
I want.
and
I,
he's
I,
using
I
all of them,
actually
like-
think it would be good if state executives had like complete power. I think it would be very interesting if every state was just run like.
But
a
isn't that already
corporation.
happened in Texas? Like they
No.
have the Congress that
No.
it's a one
Texas
party.
Texas is like the
One
breeding
party,
ground.
No,
like,
it is
state
not.
legislature.
There's a divide in Texas, right? So in the scenario I'm saying, you just have an executive. There's like no Congress, right? It's just like you're running a company. You're like, we need to do this. This will make the state better. We just do it.
Well, if there's still factions in Texas, then I don't think it would work at all because obviously if a state as like far right as an average as Texas can't agree on things, then how can a king work?
I don't think the Overton window has been quite pushed far enough yet. I think we're getting close to that.
I mean, I see what you're doing.
I think we're getting close to that.
You want to like open the discussion.
I do want to open the discussion. I acknowledge this is a bit of a crazy idea. I also think it would work. I also think it's kind of necessary. And I also think that what I'm saying, as crazy as it sounds, is just a different version of what happens in every other scenario, right? In every other scenario, like you have like countries, they get like ossified, people don't like it. And then what happens? Do they get together and like pass laws and just make everything better? No, some of it has like a fucking violent revolution and it just overthrows everything. And then you have somebody unilaterally like change everything.
Okay, can we just go further down this rabbit hole a little bit? Because Nick, I think, asked some poignant questions. He's like, okay, so what about airports and stuff? I actually
shut the airport down.
No, I want to know more about like what are these benefits of being part of the union that we would be forgiving by like seceding? Like what are the awesome benefits we get for being part of the
Military
union?
defense,
Military.
especially if you're a border state.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, you defend your own border. And does
I
Texas
don't think
make
we
enough
need to
money
secede. I
with
think
no state
just
taxes?
keep paying tidings.
So yeah, so it's just so the military is the biggest one. So the biggest one is the military, but like nobody in their right mind is going to like take over Texas anyways. Okay.
Yeah.
So military,
but they would have to control the border.
well,
That's
the
an
federal
issue.
government is not controlling the border as it is. So I don't think that's really an issue.
In Texas, they are. Right now, they are.
Well,
So just
maybe
On the southern
you
border,
fund it.
but-
How is a state that has no state taxes going to fund all of this? Like it's just.
that's a
You think that people are going to be stoked when they're like
You issue
now he's playing hardball.
you issue shares in Texas. You have like a board. It's run like a company. You've got like a board. You have like actual shareholders of Texas.
These are called governance tokens.
Are we back
They
to
go
the,
up
Are we
on-
back to crypto?
Yeah, they go.
Yeah.
These
Crypto
governance
solves this.
tokens.
there's transaction fees in form of your
Was this the
property
Miami
tax
thing?
going to
Then
Then
12%.
you
talked about-
you just have like a sales tax on everything, and that becomes like sort of revenue for the shareholders of the state. And then like obviously you become incentivized to generate more revenue, i.e., more economic activity, which makes the state presumably a better place. Now there's like a direct incentive between what creates like good outcomes.
I
and, like,
appreciate you're putting an obviously imperfect solution out there just as like a
He's on the
to
frontier.
fodder.
He's
no,
on
it's
the
good. So
frontier.
just poke some holes in it.
Yeah, he's
Let's-
on the
Well, we
frontier.
already did. Your argument's done. But like, why
My
not?
argument is not done.
Why not? Like,
Wait, what-
you mentioned Lee Kuan Yew. Like, why can't we just like tweak democracy a little bit, right? Like, they
This
have
is me tweaking democracy.
no. But they still have democracy, but they have highly paid politicians, and like you die if you're corrupt. Like you get caned in public, straight to jail. Look, we've talked about this before.
Why doesn't-
that's a great little optimization?
Why doesn't
on it.
Amazon just murder people who make bad decisions?
What
at the
is it
company?
you think about like the roll up of power that is positive? Which, by the way, as False is saying in the chat, like you go from the United States of America to the divided states of America.
No, this is how America was originally.
Well,
actually,
sure it was, but we obviously evolved past that.
What I would argue is not in a good way. In a
That
lot
was
of
just
areas.
the early solution of like a few.
No, the
colonies.
idea of having like these autonomous states that get to run their own experiments and to like enforce free travel between the states so that people can vote with their feet.
So, what is it you think that's so positive about that roll up of power?
What's
Like, don't you
posi-
think it ends up to leading to like corruption, division of rich and poor?
No, because
control of like,
because
certain
as
ethnic
long
groups.
as long as you enforce the free travel of people within states, much in the same way that you have the right to buy a different set of shoes if the shoes you buy start sucking.
So like there's a state where they're just like you know we only like Chinese people, and you come there and like you're not having a good time because you're not Chinese. You just have the freedom to leave, and that's a better country.
Yes,
because
actually, I would be in favor of that.
that's a
crazy
better
as that is.
country.
Yeah, I think that state eventually would go to zero
Well, okay,
via
this
the
is,
market.
no, it would
but this is
No,
my
a state that starts banning races is going to like lose to other states.
okay, but this
And then
is
you have
my
the market
concern.
just
Actually, is
crush.
like just playing through your scenario is like you start with one state, and that's good because you limit your downside. Just similar to like portfolio management, you know, you just like you do one state, but if that state goes to zero, as you're saying, like if it goes bad, like eventually they're going to want to get reinstated into the United States, and then that
no,
just
they would
becomes a
all
big
be
burden.
a part of the United States. I am proposing that we keep the United States and we just enable one state initially to just run the SPAC model and see what happens.
Yeah, and if it goes to zero, then that becomes a burden on people.
No, if it goes to okay, so I don't think it's going to go to zero because I think the free market works, and I think the incentives to make the state good will just work, right? And I think if the state does go to zero, a state, quote unquote, is going to have this like bevy of natural resources and everything. It's going to have value. So a different set of owners could come in and buy up the state and like redo it in a better fashion, much in the same way that in the market, like if you have like a good company that's sort of just run poorly into the ground, there are sort of ways for people to just come in, buy out that company and like
Vulture,
reintroduce it into the
private
market.
equity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Now you might say like, oh my God, what happens to the poor people? They're fucked anyway in the current system. They're not getting they're not better off. Like we did the war on poverty like 60 years ago. Or do we have less poor people? No, there's more poor people. Like, oh, look, there's gonna be all these homeless people. Let's start the war on homeless. Are there more homeless people? Less homeless people? No, there's more homeless people. Like all the problems like people point out with this is I feel like it's like shit that's like already going wrong anyway. You know, so like
All right, I'm going to throw another ball at you.
throw me balls.
What makes
throw
you
me the
think
balls.
a king would look for the benefit of its population?
What
Time
ma-
and time again, history shows unlimited power corrupts. This is from R2 in the chat.
Because you don't have unlimited power. It's the same logic behind like why do you think it's okay that Jeff Bezos like had the ability to do anything at Amazon? Well, it's because like this is a free market paradigm. And in the free market paradigm where you allow the free flow of capital and foot traffic, which is the critical element here. You have to allow the free flow of capital and foot traffic. If you allow capital to flow between and you allow people to flow between, in the same way that Jeff Bezos is bound by ultimately having to provide a product to the end consumer that is good, and the person has the freedom to leave.
Jeff Bezos is bound to increasing shareholder value. So what does it look like on a state level?
Probably GDP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So more products, more sales tax, more benefits for all.
yeah, more economic activity. The principle would sort of be that like more economic activity in general leads to more prosperity, which I would argue, if you were to plot
king
throughout the
would
course of history,
incentivize
is
this.
good.
The king would need to incentivize economic prosperity for all.
Yes,
But then
I
how
don't
that
like the
money
word
flows
king. I like
down.
the words like CEO. The state just has a
the
CEO.
CEO would need to make sure that money. Where does the money flow? Is it just industrial? Is it just like just like basic goods for all people?
No,
like
that's
what
up
are
to
the public
that's
goods?
up to the CEO and
The CEO,
exactly.
it's like they would oversee the structure of the state, like they oversee the structure of a company, like and the way to sort of distribute that value. You probably
And
want to set up these
it's
teams.
highly unlikely that that CEO would put some of that money in his pocket. It's highly
Yeah,
unlikely.
very unlikely.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what
Yeah, we don't have that at all in the modern political system, so it'll be great to avoid that.
I mean, I think what you find is a greater disparity between the rich and the poor in your system.
I disagree, actually.
Why does it lead to, like, is this just one of those arguments of the bottom rises enough that everyone's okay? And you have further economic prosperity overall. GDP rises.
I
but the
shouldn't
floor
say I
rises.
shouldn't say I disagree in the disparity.
disparity
I
definitely
think that the
increases.
bottom, the plight of the bottom would rise up, even if the
Yeah,
disparity
we've talked about
widens.
that a lot. I mean,
Well, I don't know. Like what you're describing is like venturing further into capitalism, and capitalism.
yeah, it's more free market.
Capitalism.
Is largely good. I would
It
argue.
is largely good. I agree, but it also makes those who are not providing value like really valueless.
Yeah, which is sort of one of the like we get into this thing where it's like there's this sort of ugly reality of
It's
humanity.
probably 20% of humanity or that state's population that would be completely just impoverished.
I mean, they would just go to another
10%
state,
of
honestly.
people are incapable of like holding a job or even joining the military. What do you want to do with like the other 10% that like can barely get the job and maintain, and you're like incentivizing like high production economic prosperity, and like literally 1 out of 5 people would just be like obsolete. And
I mean,
then by the way, we haven't
they'd
talked
probably
about,
leave and
we
go
haven't
to a
talked
state
about,
that would
we
have
haven't
them.
talked about AI. We haven't talked about what the technology impact of what that looks like, you know?
Yeah, and in my model, my model is better for a world with AI because the world of AI moves far too quickly. I think for the world of like democratically elected governments that have to like have this like freaking like whereas like if you just had somebody just running a state, they could just and they had like a board like the way they ran a company, they could just instantly pivot and follow things like they could adapt to this much. Look, we all agree that like living in Singapore would be like kind of nice. Like, yes, we don't want to go to jail if you spit gum on the street, and that would suck. But like, if you weigh that amongst like all the other stuff, like you can kind of see like why people like it.
I think I'd be fine with it. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't do it. It's confining in one sense.
But you
right?
should have the
But
option.
you know
to
what the
do it.
rules are.
You should have one state in the United States that's like Singapore.
The
Just
gum
have
throwing
one
state.
state.
Oh, the
one
Singapore
state that's just like CEO state, and just see what happens. It would be super interesting. Does everybody move there, or does that state fucking crash and burn? Does like this guy get corrupted and like it's just a disaster, and everybody's like, "LOL." Remember when Steven threw this shit out there on the podcast? How fucking dumb is he? But it'd be very interesting to run that experiment in one state, especially a state that is just fucking failing anyway, and that is just like basically a net drain on the federal
Do you
government
think
anyway.
if you fast forwarded that, you'd have something wildly different than we have now? Or do you think you'd kind of just end up in the same place? Like you reran the simulation. I kind of think we'd end up something very similar. At some point, that king would be like, fuck, this sucks. Like, let's just make sure they're representatives of the people so I can figure out what the people need. And you'd maybe end up in a roughly similar situation. Do you think it would be drastically different?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I followed that the whole way.
Like, so fast forward your experiment like 100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, does it end up being kings keep getting passed down, but then it evolves into some form of democracy, and you end up with something very similar to what we have now? I think that's what would happen.
No, I don't think so. I think that I don't know. I think to some extent the government was like formed before like capitalism became like super entrenched in a way. And in a world where like if you started government in a like if you could just go back in time and start, I mean, I guess it's what they did in Singapore and China, right? They started these governments from scratch in a world acknowledging that capitalism exists, and then they sort of like iterated on that. Now, the problem with China is that like you can't leave. And that like is the critical caveat I want to keep saying here, because Rocket's saying like, why would a CEO allow for people to compete freely? The competition is the same as like any other company. Like if I start a company, I can't force people to buy my product, right? And we agree that the principle of the free market is that like you have to enable me to purchase other things, and you have to enable certain rules in the market, right? So I fail to see how this goes wrong in a world where you have like multiple states that do this, and you enforce at a federal level the free flow of capital, the free flow of foot traffic, and then you enforce some basic elements of the Bill of Rights, which I think is critical here, because I don't want to descend into techno-authoritarian dictatorship.
Who's going to enforce it?
I still want the what's that?
Who's going to enforce the Bill of Rights?
we have a pretty large federal military. Like, I would like that to be sort of like the main function of the federal government, is to just like have a big military and just keep the Bill of Rights in check across states. Other than that, like, I feel like the federal government is largely useless except for like foreign policy and enforcing like the Constitution. Like, what else do we really need it for? I don't know.
So then I think you probably end up in a place that's like Hunger Games style world, where you have like District 1, which is kind of rich and utopian, and then like all the people that need resources and help, like they just get sent out to District 14, and like you just have like shitty district. That's probably where it ends up.
I just disagree.
Just disconnect the internet from there so it doesn't end up on social media.
It would be the same as like, it would be no different from like the opportunity zones thing. Like, if you were like, hey, here's some incentives to come in here, make this nice. And
Except
like,
there are
people
no
just
federal
go do it.
taxes to give incentives on.
No, there would be there's still federal taxes. Like, your state is still paying into the federal system. Like, again, like, I'm advocating for a bit of a weird hybrid system here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very into the idea of having like states.
You want a
just
benevolent
run
dictator.
I want some states to have benevolent dictators and some states to not have benevolent dictators and just run the normal way. And I just want to see what shakes out. I think it's very useless for us to have 50 states that run in like mildly tweaked versions of the same
You're sure
fucking
that
model
like
everywhere.
geography doesn't play like a bigger role in like a state's ability to
Of course
project?
it does.
Okay, so
Of course it does. But if that state is providing a product, i.e. a life for the citizens that is good and people want to go move there, then that state should just be able to do what they're doing. As long as they're not encroaching upon the sort of basic tenets of the federal government, they're not encroaching on the rights of the other states. Like, why is that bad?
What layer is Steven in this?
This fantasy.
Yeah.
It's not even a dream. It's a cool hypothetical. I think it's.
No, I like it. I just keep shooting it down. I'll keep stress testing it.
I can guarantee you, I feel very strongly about this, that we will see a new form of government definitely in our lifetimes, but I would guess in the next 10 to 15 years.
I agree.
Like some kind of
agree.
new wave that isn't.
network state.
Yeah, probably. I think it'll have a lot to do with AI and crypto. But mostly AI.
Rocket, come into the Discord. Tell me all the holes. I will shoot down all of your holes. That sounds weird.